Today I'm going to talk about the Insta360 One RS 1-inch edition and how does a camera that has 6K recording, that has a partnership with Leica, has dual 1-inch sensors, has beautiful image quality compared to other 360 cameras, and can film in every single direction be such a flop.
Bruh.
After a year of ownership, why would I even consider selling this camera as if it were my children? Well, let's talk about what it can do. Tiny planet, which is good for 0.01% of your footage before it becomes a bigger fad than neck tats. Reframing for impossible shots, which is cool for the first few times, and then you realize you don't know why you pressed the record button, and it makes about as much sense as your drunk uncle. You get to the point that you think to yourself, maybe being normal isn't such a bad idea. Normal morning breakfast, normal morning coffee, normal morning paper with kids yelling in the background. So you get to the point that maybe you want to use this camera for conventional filming. You just want a front view. You just want a rear view. You want to put this in between two people and have each person's perspective. You may find it extremely challenging. However, before we get to the challenging part, let's discuss this camera briefly. It does 6K. That means that both cameras going at the same time produces a 6K video. However, that is split between the front and the rear. So once you start cropping, then you're left with half. And then you find out that 180 degrees field of view, once you crop that some more, well, you get even a tinier portion. It's like buying a bag of chips and finding out that it's mostly air. Aside from that, it does have a 1-inch sensor on both sides, so you can still get reasonably decent video from each of the sensor, if that makes sense, even though it's low resolution. Comparing this to other devices in similar categories, this 360 camera does produce very good image quality. It does have very good stabilization, so you don't have to worry about shakes and jitters. The Insta360 software is not bad. It's actually kind of good. You can create time lapses, hyperlapses after the fact of filming, because if you don't have an idea of what you're doing it after the fact is a good thing. So the software is great until you realize that if you're using this for conventional filming, you have to use the software. And if you're using this camera to film often, you may have 20 or 30 clips in one project. That means that you have to render out 20 or 30 individual clips. So the problem with that is if you're reframing every single clip, every single time, you're creating keyframes every single clip, every single time, you will find this workflow extremely tedious. It will make your head go bald. That was from this camera.
Bruh.
This camera can drive you insane. And before I start blaming Insta360 about this problem, it's not really their fault. The influencers in the 360 sphere, it's not really their fault either. I believe most of them use this device on their phone. They import on their phone and use the phone app because the phone app is really terrific. They use that to edit their videos. However, if you're using this as a normal camera, normal workflows, you'll find that using your phone to process 20 or 30 clips and then importing it back to your computer, that takes a lot of time. It takes time just to wirelessly transmit. It takes a lot of time to transmit that much data, and it takes a lot of space on your phone, and then transmit it back to your computer before you can even do any work. That's going to take hours. If you're just done filming, you want to take a look at your footage right away. That's not really acceptable. So before throwing in the towel, giving up, and selling this device, I decided to have one last look at it. I recalled an older video by Philip Bloom. He was using this device in a professional editor, and he didn't have to use the Insta360 Studio app. The problem with that is that Philip Bloom is a professional, and his professional workflow was probably over my head. But actually it wasn't. So what you do is you batch export 360 style video right to your drive, and then you can start editing right away. It's just one extra step before getting your footage, and it's one batch step. And another thing that's good about it is that you can control your codec and the bit rate that's coming in, because these files are large. You can control that flow. And I found out that it is actually ultra easy to create multi-angle clips with just one video recording. Think about that. You're recording both sides at a time, and then you create a multi-angle clip with both sides at a time. So angle 1, angle 2. How neat is that? And do you have to reframe every time? Sort of. There is a trick to doing this method, because when you're exporting 360 footage, it exports it in a certain direction, and it has a inherent crop that is a certain amount. So your footage comes in as a 24 millimeter field of view, and then to get your second angle, all you have to do is you duplicate the clip, and then you put the panning to 180 degrees, and there you go. You have a front view and a rear view. There is one trick, and that is how the camera is oriented. So that means that you cannot just mindlessly press record, and that is how this device is kind of marketed. That is how people use this device. You just mindlessly press the record button because you think you can reframe everything after the fact. But this right here, this is your front. When you press record, you're going to get the 24 millimeter view from this front, and it doesn't even matter what the app says. You don't do any direction lock. Your footage is just going to be based on here. Okay, so if you're pointing it towards yourself because you want to see the screen, that's what your thumbnail is going to look like. That's what your footage is going to look like. It's always going to be direction locked. So if you turn the camera, no matter where you turn, the front of this is going to be the view. So that's how you use it as a conventional camera. You have to purposely point your camera in the direction, and you should be okay with that if you're used to conventional filming. Otherwise, you can technically just point your camera any way you want it, but then you end up having to reframe this, reframe that, and then you end up in the scenario where you have to reframe everything, and it's kind of like reframing your wife's request for a restaurant to cook at home. It's not going to turn out well. So the question may be that maybe you don't like the 24 millimeter field of view. Maybe you don't like the position it's in. Maybe you don't like the current framing. Yes, you may adjust the framing a little bit. It's not that difficult to do. It's basically a one-time deal. It carries along with your entire footage. And if you messed up your filming where you forgot to point this camera in the right direction, then that's just something that you learn along when using this. You're going to have to break your habit if you want to film this as a normal camera. You can't just aimlessly point at stuff and hope for the best. It doesn't work that way. You'll have to intentionally press the record button when it's time to record. So to sum it up, when you get a device like this, you will get over the gimmicky features of what it can do. You're gonna get into a scenario where you want normal type of filming. And for normal type of filming, in my opinion, the rectilinear 360 flat type of video is where you want to be. You want it directly inside of your editor, and then you adjust from there. You could create multicam clips. You can pan the camera around as you like. You create your own keyframes as needed. You don't have to do it all the time. And then it becomes a very usable camera that you can tolerate. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, share. See you in the next one. Take care.